Aurelius' Meditations. The reason I say this is unplanned is because I'm actually like on a lunch break from an online conference for something else, and we were unable to like today. We're going to be starting the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
And we were unable to find an ebook version of this translation because Amazon's database folds a lot of translations into the format listings for their books. So when you click on the Kindle version, it actually comes up with a completely different translation that is public domain, and it's fairly useless to the modern reader unless you want to read Shakespearean English. Poorly written Shakespearean English, I might add. So, with that in mind, I guess we're just going to be reading out loud like story time. But before we do that, since you've been reading like Pierre Hadot, I thought you'd have like more to say about the Meditations than I would in terms of an introduction. So go for it.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor from around, I think, 140 AD to, oh, it's back here. So he was born in 121, and he died around 180 AD.
Yeah.
So he was an emperor for, I think, what was it, like 2 decades or a decade and a half? I know he was co-emperor. Like, it's kind of a weird thing, but Marcus was adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had a brother named, his name was what? Service?
Damn it.
But anyway, yeah, so he was an emperor for a time.
He actually insisted that he be co-emperor with his adopted brother. They were not blood related, but they were adopted into the same family.
Yeah. Marcus had a lot of tutors growing up. He was attracted to philosophy from a very young age, and that's because of the mentors.
Yeah.
And the time he was living in, the Emperor Hadrian, when Marcus was a kid, Hadrian liked to have different philosophers around him, but he liked sophists. And sophists were people who they were basically rhetoricians for pay.
Yeah, and depending on how deep you are in modern philosophy and what your personal taste in philosophy is, you might actually think that you're studying nothing but sophistry, and that's one of the reasons I stopped.
Marcus was at an early age attracted to Stoicism, but also other Greek schools of philosophy. But eventually, as he aged, he fell more back into Stoicism, especially around the time when when the Roman Empire was struggling from not only disease, like a pandemic, but also, which is funny because we were in one. But so yeah, he had to deal with a pandemic, brewing civil war. His co-emperor adopted brother was essentially useless because he would just spend his time partying and just basically wasting military resources.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that at first, the Roman legions were more in favor of Marcus's brother.
Yeah.
Being the emperor as opposed to Marcus himself, until they realized that his brother was mostly show and was really afraid of everything, which is why he partied so much.
Yeah.
Marcus worked with him, however, because he realized that the dude had more connections and was much better at that side of things, and Marcus just took care of the more important things, but he still found value in his relationship with his adopted brother.
Yeah, I think that says something about his Stoic education too, because Stoicism, it's about like staying true to your family, even if your family is filled with people who might not strive for the same kinds of things you might strive for. But he kind of looked at his brother as sort of like a contrast. Like, oh, I should be more like this.
Right.
like my brother doing this stuff.
And at the
So,
same time, he was
yeah.
able to recognize what his brother was good at.
Yeah, so that's a good example of how the Stoics try to apply stuff like that, especially being an emperor, because Epictetus was a slave
Yeah.
and then exiled, and then yeah. So Marcus represents a different position,
And
and it's interesting because Marcus had no prior military experience, but when he was out on the front lines, he was noted for both his military, like his charisma with the soldiers,
yeah.
and also he was actually a decent strategist.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's because of the Stoicism or a natural mind like that, but I like to think that practicing philosophy, at least the way the ancient Greeks practiced it, did help with things like strategy and managing a state and all that.
Because like it cultivates this idea that like it's desirable to keep a level head as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And according to different letters and stuff, it appeared Marcus did maintain like a calm demeanor. And the thing is, Marcus dealt with a lot of physical frailties, especially as he got older. So that's probably a testament to like the philosophy, or how the philosophy strengthened his character to keep him from complaining. And the Meditations is kind of like his own personal journal to himself. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't really meant for publication, but
And
you
that's
know, history being what it is, it got published eventually.
and that's one thing to like really be mindful of, because there are parts where he's like criticizing, right?
Hmm.
But we have to remember that he's talking to himself. Like he thinks he should be better.
Yeah, yeah,
If he were alive today, we probably would have diagnosed him with some sorts of disabilities, because it's been said that he was frail through his entire childhood. And like part of what he talks about in terms of like wanting to undertake philosophy as a way of life was to make himself stronger.
yeah, yeah. And I think he may have achieved that, at least based on the writings
Yeah.
that have come down from us. But it's
Another
pretty much,
funny thing to note is that Hadrian was the opposite of a Stoic. He was very hot-tempered,
yeah,
and he was said to have been so angry that in the heat of the moment, he stabbed a dude in the eye with a stylus.
yep,
So Marcus gives thanks to Hadrian for allowing him to have tutors and for showing him what not to do.
yeah, and that's the crux. I think that is the crux of Stoic philosophy. Like, people tend to get lost in the particulars of it, but when you look at it generally, Stoicism, it's a pretty nice framework if you're trying to improve yourself, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And one thing I was gonna say is um, the types of ideas that Marcus brings up in his book, I think, are pretty interesting. And as we read, because we're going to be reading this for the next couple weeks.
It's going to be a while, probably.
Yeah, so there are some ideas that that might echo Epictetus, and then others that might have a little bit of an Eastern flavor to it, which I kind of like because you don't expect that.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because Marcus's teacher was taught by, I think it was one of Epictetus's students,
Yeah,
and his teacher gifted him a copy of Epictetus's discourses. So for those of you who stuck around for our reading of the discourses, and well, the Enchiridion, my bad.
yeah,
We read the discourses.
yeah.
You'll see a lot of those ideas echoed, but Marcus is much more of a philosophical eclectic, I think, than Epictetus was. Kind of like Seneca. Seneca was kind of an eclectic.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with book 2, because book 1 is just like a book of gratitude.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want me to start?
Sure, why not?
All right. So when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me, no one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is unnatural. To feel anger at someone, to turn your back on him, these are obstructions.
Because of Marcus's physical frailty, he does a lot of this.
Yeah,
He's like preparing himself for the day ahead. Modern Stoics have given to calling that premeditatio malorum, or meditation on adversity.
yeah,
And some people think that it makes you more depressed. I mean, if you have some kind of psychiatric condition that predisposes you to that, it's best to do this with a clinician. You'll see a lot of clinicians practice some version of this. They won't call it that
yeah,
because the name scares people.
yeah,
But you'll notice he does one important thing here. He also gives himself a mental solution. He's like, oh, these people are just like me in that they share the capacity to reason. And like the Greeks, especially the Stoics, thought that that's what made humans different than other animals. And they were like, as long as you share that, I have to like sort of look at you as extended family.
yeah,
And that's the Stoic solution to like that sort of thing, because they're like, oh well, it's not that you're less than me, it's that your reasoning is kind of faulty in like the way that you're thinking of certain premises or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
And so that takes a lot of the mental and emotional sting out of a difficult situation. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the Stoic concept of the brotherhood, or the fact that we're all the same deep down, yeah, we're gonna see a lot of this in here, and it's kind of interesting because he is in a position of power that a lot of people envy.
Yeah.
So
He was literally the most powerful dude in the known world for his time.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if you want to know what somebody who's emperor of the world would do if they were a good person, I mean, he made a lot of mistakes during his reign, but I mean, the fact that he tried really hard to stick to something,
yeah,
a lot more than our current age.
yeah,
Whatever this is that I am, it is flesh and a little spirit and an intelligence. Throw away your books. Stop letting yourself be distracted. That is not allowed. Instead, as if you were dying right now, despise your flesh, a mess of blood, pieces of bone, a woven tangle of nerves, veins, and arteries. Consider what the spirit is, air, and never the same air, but vomited out and gulped up again in every instant. Finally, the intelligence. Think of it this way. You're an old man. Stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked about by selfish impulses, to kick against fate, the present, and to mistrust the future. Basically, like, this is a reminder to not attach himself so hard to what he thinks he is, what we all think we are. We all tend to think that we are our thoughts, we are our bodies, we are our desires or whatever else. And he's like, all of this crap is just,
right,
stuff that will eventually go away. So just focus on right now. And he closes it with being like, focus on right now rather than the future, basically.
yeah.
because all we have of the future is our thoughts about what might be, not what is.
Right. What else is interesting is stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mistrust the future. Yeah, mistrust the future. I thought was an interesting ending.
Always in motion, the future is.
Yeah, because of expectations that we have about the future, whether it's negative or positive. Either way, it tends to upset us when it doesn't go the way we thought.
Yeah, even, dude, I've seen people get upset at good things because they were so hell bent on like the worst case scenario happen
Yeah.
that they actually get upset when something good happens, and it's weird.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. Like, it's a little hard to fathom for me because
Right,
those
right.
types of things are pretty clear in my head. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. So yeah. All right. What is divine is full of providence. Even chance is not divorced from nature, from the inweaving and infolding of things governed by providence. Everything proceeds from it, and then there is necessity in the needs of the whole world, of which you are a part. Whatever the nature of the whole does, and whatever serves to maintain it, is good for every part of nature. The world is maintained by change, in the elements and in the things they compose. That should be enough for you. Treat it as an axiom. Discard your thirst for books so that you won't die in bitterness, but in cheerfulness and truth, grateful to the gods from the bottom of your heart.
I mean, is there like there's one thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
For people who've been sticking around, you all know that, Stoics were basically compatibilists, which meant that they believed in free will, but they believed also that like certain things were sort of fated to come into existence.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there are still weird, hard determinists in our world, and every time I talk to them, my brain it short circuits because they have this weird certainty about biological determinism that I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still compatibilists, and then weird still, there are people that just think life is a bunch of chaos and there's nothing deterministic about it. My personal point of view on that is that I guess this is a form of compatibilism, right? Like, given certain actions, certain outcomes are damn near inevitable.
Yeah.
And to expect anything to the contrary to me is just kind of, frankly, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, if you, and I've, I've met people in this type of situation, and I've been in these types of situations, but I mean, if you live a life where you're constantly stealing from others or manipulating other people, and like that's the beginning of your life, if at some point you leave it behind and it comes back to bite you in the ass, my answer to you is, what else did you expect?
Yeah.
And like, I understand that, like, people turn over a new leaf and are trying to live cleaner lives and better lives and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have to expect that your previous decisions are going to have an effect on your current
present. Yeah.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention, but I kind of forgot. Hold on. Oh, discard your thirst for books. So some people use that as an attack on Stoicism advocating stupidity.
Yeah.
Like, oh, see, they're saying not to read. And I mean, like, when I encountered this for the first time when I was like, I don't know, 19 or 20, some shit like that.
Right.
I sort of thought that's what it was saying, but like, after I got to know like Plato and Aristotle and more of this stuff, the stance that the Stoics take is that knowledge by itself isn't necessarily good. It's about what you do with it.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there reading books for basically intellectual masturbation,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not doing anything with that knowledge, as in you're not applying it toward anything,
Right.
then it's a useless endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
They're not saying don't read books.
Yeah.
They're saying if you're going to spend time reading books, make it a worthwhile endeavor.
Yep.
Number 5 is actually one. Oh wait, we're on number 4.
Or,
Yeah, my bad. Remember how long you've been putting this off. How many extensions the gods gave you and you didn't use them. At some point, you have to recognize what world it is that you belong to, what power rules it, and from what source you spring. That there is a limit to the time assigned you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and it will never return. Shit, to me that's pretty.
yeah.
I remember reading at certain points, like both his families were afraid that he would die.
Yeah, at early time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he seems to be aware of that.
Yeah, like be aware of how many extensions the gods gave you. So yeah, like how many extensions life has given you, however, whatever you want to use. Like,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know very many people who've been put in life-threatening situations, which is why it's hard for me to talk to some people.
Yeah.
Because they talk about living in the moment, and then like they will spend 40 hours a week trying to collect money that they don't use, and I'm like, well, I'm setting up for the future. It's like, what if you died tomorrow? What would you do with it? I don't know.
I kind of understand it if you have a family, but like if it's just yourself, I don't know. It depends on why you're doing it. But you're right. There are a lot of people who just start accumulating stuff, but then they just sit on top of it. I mean, well, you already know this. I have a couple family members that just think like that.
Yeah.
They're like in their 60s and, well, I think even 70s or something, but it's like they're not going to give it up either. And I'm like, where is it going to go after they die? And then it's just going to go nowhere.
And I'm not just talking about money either. Whatever you're spending your time doing, like, and I have problems remembering this when I'm super depressed. So, this is just as much for me as anybody else. But, like, whatever you're spending your time doing, like, dude, do your best to make sure that it's actually something that amounts to something for you personally. And I'm not talking about, like, status or job security. Like, make sure that no matter what you do, you can actually look at it and sort of say that you have some pride in that. Like, it was actually important to you. Which is why, even though I don't have anything against people who work like what we would classify as minimum wage jobs, I usually ask them, is that what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah. Something I had to ask myself a lot too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and speaking about minimum wage jobs, like working with people who've been at a place for, let's say, 3 decades or so, very, very rarely do they seem happy. I mean,
Right.
I'm just saying that. I mean, I have met people who pretty much, I don't know if you want to call it acceptance. Some people I know, they are resigned to it, and I use that word resigned selectively to mean that oh, this isn't what they really wanted out of life, but they've been here for so long and they don't know what else to do, so then yeah. And I've talked to people like that, and it's just you can always sense a bit of bitterness with them or disappointment.
On the flip side, like, I've met people, and I know you have too, that literally didn't think they would be anywhere in life, and for them to have like a job that gives them medical benefits, gives them full-time work,
Yeah.
and allows them to pay for a home is what makes them happy.
Yeah, I've met
And
people like that too.
like if you're there, like my comment's not to you. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Like if that's what you really wanted out of life and you got it, more power to you, dude.
Yeah, and you're still like being helpful towards people and
Yeah.
all that, because someone could have all of that too, but then they're still like an asshole inside. And
Yeah.
I've met those people too.
Well, we both have. Yeah.
Yeah, and very rarely some of them can be a little predatory.
Yeah. Some
Take
people
that, take
bring to mind.
whatever meaning you want from that, but they exist.
This one I actually had circled.
Oh, nice.
Concentrate every minute like a Roman, like a man, on doing what is in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, and with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. Yes, you can, if you do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life, and stop being aimless. Stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you. Stop being hypocritical, self-centered, and irritable. You see how few things you have to do to live a satisfying and reverent life? If you can manage this, that's all even the gods can ask of you. What the hell's that?
Car alarm.
Oh.
No. I'll be right back, guys.
That live streaming life. Holy crap. And I mean, like, so right here, this is sort of a Zen Buddhist thing, right? Where all you have is literally the moment. The past is an imagining, like a narrative of things that happened to you, and the future hasn't happened yet, and all you have are your own thoughts on it. So he's basically saying, just take the time to engage with what you're doing right now. And like, I have a feeling Marcus must have had some kind of depression.
Yeah.
Because he said, yes, you can. If you do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life, and stop being aimless, stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you. Stop being hypocritical, self-centered, and irritable. I mean, if you've ever been in the middle of a depressive spiral, that's pretty much what it feels like.
Yeah.
At least that's what it feels like for me.
Same.
Everything good?
Yep. I don't know whose car was that, but looks like everything's fine.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Yes, keep on degrading yourself, soul, but soon your chance at dignity will be gone. Everyone gets one life. Yours is almost used up, and instead of treating yourself with respect, you have entrusted your own happiness to the souls of others. So, yeah, this is like, oh man, there's so much in here, and it's so little. But yeah, entrusting your own happiness to the souls of others. This is what I think a lot of people encounter, including myself when I was younger. The idea that you can find happiness in someone else, or like, that's like I guess the end goal for some people.
I think we're kind of raised to believe that.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to someone about relationships and how sometimes, like, when you realize you've been with that person for a while and you realize that you can't, like, it's not really working, some people are at a crossroads where they can either end it or they're so comfortable that they just keep it going. And then people just kind of settle into just a pattern. And, oh, go ahead.
Sometimes the relationship can end after a while of that being the case, too.
Yep, that too. It's just some people cling to the idea of it that it becomes even more devastating than it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I mean, this doesn't have to just be like romantic entanglements. It can also be stuff like if you were part of a group or something else like that. People find their identities in that as well, and when they're no longer with that group, they become depressed.
Like an example from my own personal life of a similar thing is like, I spent a long time doing two things: computer shit and tutoring people. And when I say computer shit, like, I did graphic design, web design, video production. I built and fixed computers, and I tutored for 15 years in basically a bunch of different subjects, anything but math, essentially.
Yeah.
And like, when I decided I was gonna stop doing that because like it wasn't really working out for me anymore, like my hands suck, so it's harder to work on people's stuff now, and I ended up having to ask for a bunch of help, and it made me feel horrible. So I decided to like step away from doing a lot of that stuff, and even though I had made that choice, like, there was a long time where that shit made me sad.
Yeah.
Because if you do stuff for long enough, you start to identify yourself with whatever you're doing.
Yep.
And it's really hard to separate you, the person, from the things you do, especially in post-industrial capitalist societies.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because I think it's part of that whole cultural paradigm.
Yep.
To associate yourself with your worth and your worth as a person with what you do, because that's how we socially assign worth to people. And if you don't believe me, I don't care, because I see it every day.
Same.
It's real whether you believe it or not. If you've ever seen people retire and watch the depression that they go through, tell me where that came from.
Yeah.
If you have a different answer to that question, give it to me, because I guarantee you it's because they've done something for so long. They've gone to the same place, talked to the same people, engaged in the same sorts of activities. I watched it happen with both my grandparents.
Yeah, and that's where it tends to start showing when people grow older. They can't do the things they used to do. Yeah, I've seen the same pattern. So, and well, working at a grocery store, like, and helping people who are senior citizens and stuff, I've spoken with a lot of them. Like, you'd be surprised how much you can learn about a person just doing a job like that, because you see them like consistently. So I've had senior citizens tell me frankly that, like, you know what, like, I'm just really lonely and I like coming here because you guys, like, you know, you guys are polite and you actually, like, yeah, stuff like that. Like, and sometimes I just feel a little like sad for them, because either because they didn't keep close friendships, or maybe they lost those friendships through death and stuff like that, or like they're just distant from their family. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, and so, like, yeah, that's where you tend to see it.
Exactly. And like, it's weird, right? Because you and I have talked about how difficult it is to make friends as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, okay, when you're in school, whether it's K through 12 or university or whatever,
Yeah.
um, you're surrounded by a bunch of different people, many of whom have some of the same goals as you, or they might have completely different goals. They all come from completely different backgrounds, and so you're not necessarily confined to uh, people in your super immediate surroundings, or your immediate surroundings are rich with different types of people.
Right.
When you work, when you go to work, often you're in an environment with fewer people than if you were at school.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, those people do the same type of shit you do. Um, depending on the type of job, the people there may or may not be goal oriented at all.
Right.
They might not have any more goals. Where you're at might be their goal.
Yep.
So I don't know, for me at least, that kind of led to me not wanting to make friends because I didn't necessarily care for the types of people I worked with in some situations.
Yeah.
I know you sort of felt that way during certain periods at your 11-year stint at a grocery store, right? Like,
yeah, people just come and go basically.
and so what I've noticed with
Yeah.
older people, right? So they have that same problem, but turned up to like 100 on a 10-point scale.
Yep.
Because their friends are dead,
Mm-hmm.
their family may or may not be very involved, and they might think it's impossible to form new friendships.
Right.
Like my grandpa didn't even think it was worth it.
Yeah, and that's something I see a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, well, like I said, sometimes the grocery store is like their only social experience that they have for the day. Either that or things like going to church, that type of stuff that fosters communities.
Yeah.
That tends to help with the loneliness. Or yeah, religious gatherings, family gatherings where there's a lot of people. But in terms of like personal relationships and stuff, a lot of senior citizens do go through some type of small depression too.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw this kind of harsh rhetorical point out there, but if you want to know what it's like to sort of be on the fringes of society, talk to an elderly person, talk to someone with a disability who's living on SSI, talk to someone who's homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're gonna find is a pretty consistent experience of feeling like you've been discarded.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, shit, dude, there's some days where I still feel like that. I mean, so I'll just leave and go somewhere just to be somewhere else.
Right.
Literally. Shit. How much more? Should we do like one more?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. 7, right?
Yeah, 7.
This kind of reinforces what you were saying about the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
Do external things distract you? Then make time for yourself to learn something worthwhile. Stop letting yourself be pulled in all directions. But make sure you guard against that kind of confusion. People who labor all their lives but have no purpose to direct every thought and impulse toward wasting their time. Even when hard at work.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think of people who surrender themselves to a company without really. It's gonna sound weird, but really not knowing why they're alive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because there's a difference between the person who gives their life to a company because, like, either because it's something about the vision or ideals behind it, and they're really passionate about it. But then there's the other type of person who does it, but it's because they don't know what else to do with their lives.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of person I never wanted to be when I encountered people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a point in my life where I encountered someone like that, and I realized that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
If any of you ever grew up like traditional Mexican or hella Asian,
Mm-hmm.
there's this phenomenon culturally, and I mean it's common across like people who grow up in like immigrant families,
Yeah.
right? Like there's this feeling of indebtedness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're born, there are future hopes springed upon you,
Yeah.
right? Or sprung.
Yeah.
Yeah, sprung. I can speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so often you'll just sort of do what they tell you.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, at least, what ended up happening is after all those forces were gone, because all of my grandparents are dead, including the ones on my dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what to do with myself
Yeah.
because I was so used to people nagging me, dude,
Yep.
that when that disappeared, I was like, well, why the hell am I still doing any of this?
Right.
Um, who am I? And dude, like headed into my late 30s, man, and like to be that age and then like basically go through that all over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's frightening, dude.
Yeah.
And the Stoics weren't really fans of frivolity.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's one of the reasons why mentally we might be Stoic, but like when it comes to practical things, we tend to be a little more Epicurean.
Yeah. Well, to Marcus, all of it was philosophy then.
True.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's a whole nother conversation. I was about to be like, well, compared to like Western philosophy today, but that's a whole other topic that I don't think we have time for.
I wish we did because I actually want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find something to throw in as a bookmark. But I mean, I don't know the conference schedule anymore because lunch was supposed to be 12 to 1, and they're already doing another panel,
Oh.
which I mostly look like I missed. So uh, I don't know what's happening, but it's okay because they're gonna put like all the video on demand stuff up, so
Oh.
I'll be able to catch up. I mean, it's fine. I'm not like it's a little doing conferences online is weird.
Yeah.
If any of you have ever tried to go to an online conference that you've been to in person, or a similar type of conference online to ones you've been to in person,
Mm-hmm.
it's very strange. But I mean, like I guess that's gonna be it for today's stream.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna talk to you for like 10-15 minutes, some shit.
All right.
And I'll, for the rest of you guys, see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
We were going to do this on Sunday, but I'm apparently helping write a screenplay. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
See you guys later.
See ya.